I have in the studio Raymond Aqua and Winston Amwa. Winston heads our political desk and Raymond Aqua our research desk. Well, there are some people that argue that the Supreme Court erred in its ruling because it lacks jurisdiction. We've heard our NDC friends, lawyers, talk about lacking jurisdiction, and they quote Article 99 of the Constitution. Is that the case?
Now, there is something more important than the conversation about whether or not it has jurisdiction. And forgive me because I'm actually drilling down what's happening now. Two things are key here. First and foremost, and I've said it consistently, even if you disagree with what the Supreme Court has said, there are avenues for you to challenge that. If you think that it is so absurd a decision that it can never be corrected, I do believe that we have established for ourselves a jurisprudence that allows that the final say at that level is the Supreme Court of the Republic of Ghana. So, please, let's not dismiss these claims. Let's not get it wrong. Let's not have doubts about the relevance of that institution in our jurisprudence. Let's also not get it wrong that I can have very serious problems with it. And I've heard people raise that serious issue. Can I, Raymond Aqua, at any point in time, file a case at 10 a.m. on Friday and get that case heard the same day? And we have seen others try it. People tell, oh, it's possible. We have tried that. We say justice ought not to be done alone, but ought to be seen and manifestly seen to be done. If there are difficulties with, and many people have raised it, again, there is also the general clamor. And if Afrobarometers reports anything to go by, the judiciary, the police, and also the Electoral Commission, the trust of the public in these institutions is an all-time low. And I wrote a story on it, stipulating over the period how it's dipping and how it's gone extremely low. So if you have an institution that's gotten its trust levels go this low, the essential understanding is that you want to improve it. Did this conduct of the judiciary improve trust in the institution? I'm not even talking the substantive issue, because I think it is possible for a court to make some of these orders, but as to whether it is reasonable, it is fair and candid, as Article 29 says, in the performance of your discretionary powers, even as a court, it must be fair, candid, and reasonable. You let me pretend that the jury is still out there on whether or not that decision was fair, candid, and reasonable. I am expecting that we do not create a chaotic situation where today the people in my hometown feel that a decision of the court does not go their way. It is preposterous, it's outlandish, and they have all the words you can use to describe it, and we decide that we do what we want to do. Or protest, and I'm not saying protest is wrong, or protest by deciding not to comply with it. What we can do, unfortunately, by the structures we have put together as a state, is to comply with the available alternatives here. For example, file a case to contest it. For example, ask that the issue be remedied one way or the other. So there are remedies still within our judicial system to correct this. Know why this is important? Many people believe this was an unjust ruling. Justice is key. But if we allow people saying that I will not comply with it to stand, it may mean that the court can give just rulings, and yet people will still say that I feel, and that's the key word there, I feel, or I think, or I disagree with it, but I will not exhaust the remedies available in law to me. I will go against that. That will be problematic. So that's why we should situate this conversation. We are not just having a conversation about whether or not who says left or right in Parliament. We are having a conversation about what in the United Kingdom they call the fundamental principles of state. What is separation of powers? Baron de Montesquieu conceived that, but at the core of separation of power is the other principle, checks and balances. So that in our system, no institution, be it the executive president who leads the executive, feels that they are too superior or they are above the other one. Simply put this way, someone is to make the law, Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. Another person's job is to interpret the law. The people who made the law can feel that your interpretation is completely absurd. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. But it is somebody else's job to do the interpretation of the law, even if you disagree with it. Again, enforcement and executive powers are enshrined in another branch's role. if one branch feels that the conduct of the other is impeaching on this way, it is the responsibility of taking back to that particular judiciary. And let's not pretend that the 5 that sat and made a decision, that is the entirety of our judiciary. There are other people within that same scope that can give a different verdict on what has happened. I hope we are getting the scope properly. If there are availability or if the alternative is there for you to explore that, we should not, and we are barely 2 months into the new election. The things that should be occupying our time, with all due respect, is whether or not we are fashioning a way out of the various options on the table for a better Ghana. Whether or not we have enough money to pay the debt that will be accruing in the next few years to come. The prosperity of the people, and I'm not leaving out justice, because I am one of those who think that without justice, no state can prevail. And justice is in so many forms. So we should be looking at some of these issues and how to build proper structures as a state. Not really spending quality time on who sits where, who marches into parliament when. And see, let's not get it wrong, Winston. This is the final point I'm making on this. The picture we paint either strengthens or undermines the democracy. This our democracy, I consider is to be a Trojan horse democracy, a pretentious one. But when we paint the picture that we cannot even agree on where to sit, how to sit, or what to do, not on the substantive issues of what you are going to do in parliament, that signal you are sending to the ordinary people is that you're not serious about that. And let's not get it wrong. The Afrobarometer also suggests that on the continent, increasingly, people are becoming disinterested or less interested in democracy as a solution to building a better state for them. Some of these things participate or add up to it. So it is a threat to the entirety of that political class. And they should be equally minded by that. And not just be thinking, oh yeah, my position, and the only thing that's important is who votes where on December 7th. In any case, we have seen over the years, when they get a power, what they do with it. We end up with domestic debt exchange and all the other debt exchanges. We end up in an economic situation that's terrible. Those are the conversations that should be occupying our primus time as a people, not some of the things that are not as relevant. And even so, this is not even a principle-based debate.
And I'll be coming.
They are not even debating on principle.
Exactly.
They're just saying,
Raymond, I'll be coming to you shortly. Okay. I'll be coming to Winston as well. I'm told I have very long one, I must say. I have Professor Kwesi Anin. He is a security and political analyst. He joins the conversation via phone. Thank you for your time here on Newsdesk. You've seen what has played out on the floor of Parliament. For a while now, people have been calling for cool heads to prevail. Security has been tightened in Parliament, but look at the conduct of our MPs. What's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this fits into a pattern that started already in January 2021, prior to the election of the Speaker. The rowdiness, the sacrilegious invasion of Parliament by the military that has never been investigated as to who issued that order, who told them to disperse and to leave, and what the impact has been on our Parliament, and the possibility that the next time such a sacrilegious invasion takes place, the people may not leave. Not only that, we've also seen very disturbing rowdy, riotous behavior over time. Sometimes the passing of bills that are detrimental to the long-term, stability and functioning of the state. I want to give 2 examples. One is the LI that permitted the mining in our river. The second one relates to that LI that's in which parliamentarians sought to flout the traffic regulations as they campaigned. So what we are seeing this morning fits into that pattern in which it is the very short-term, narrow interest of people in the House and not the enterprise called Ghana that drives the behavior and increasingly the decisions that are made. What the signal that this sends is that we are on a nice edge of breaking every single rule, and that the interest of the larger population, those who actually put these 275 people into that house, does not matter. Perceptions in politics, as in other types of or forms of our experiences, play a very key role. And as a friend of mine just said to me, actually what is happening now is what other African countries will start to use as a quiz as to this country that had this perception or notion of being a stable, functional democracy actually has been underpinned by a lack of respect for the rule of law. That it looks as if it is ruled by law that this parliament seeks. And I want to go back to your previous speaker because he raised really very critical points before I come finally to the security side. Public service is simply what it is, the word service. But it doesn't only come with privileges, it also comes with responsibilities, in which the national interest must always be negotiated around so that we move from a zero-sum game to a win-win, in which Enterprise Ghana is who wins. The blatant perception that we will not follow the interest of Ghana is becoming problematic. You see, when checks and balances, and I think the previous speaker spoke about checks and balances, between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, it looks as if those checks and balances have broken down, that there is no respect for the jurisdiction of each of these groups. That each party thinks, look, I am big enough. I do not need to compromise so that there is peace. People do forget that the symbolism and the significance of what people are watching on TV. I unfortunately don't know how to turn on my TV, so I am not watching. But my nephew just sent me the link, so I can watch it on my phone. The symbolism is that people now think, but these are the people who govern us. If they are that rowdy and they don't respect the rules of the game, then what is my business being told to respect the rules of the game? I've also seen people demonstrating and going towards Parliament. What if other parties also mobilize and send people there? How will the police act? Now, if the police is not able to deal with an increasingly widespread, disobedience, will the military step in? And if they step in, will they go back home? So what we are seeing is a knife-edged situation in which the bigger issues of the importance of the next election, because without all this hula-baloo and disgraceful behavior, the December 7th election was a defining election for this country. What type of governance do we need? What is the nexus between those, the elected and the governed? How do we ensure that checks and balances from civil society or the wider community can rein in the excesses and abuses that we have seen? So to shove all that under the carpet and then to say, which side of the house am I expected to sit, creates an impression that these 275 people are totally oblivious of the crisis in which this country is. As I speak to you now, which side of the house who said, truly, does not impact my life at all. What I'm looking for is that there's enough peace and stability and the rule of law and order so that on the 7th of December, I can vote peacefully, come home, see it counted, so that those that we elect as a people, based on their experiences in the last couple of years, will lead this country in a way in which we can heave a sigh of relief. What is happening is sending a clear signal to all of us that we are not out of the woods, and actually that we may be getting much deeper into trouble.
Prof, stay with me. Let me come into studio and bring in Winston Amma. Professor Kwesi Ening argues that this display of lawlessness in Parliament, it's a clear description of how little our parliamentarians feel about our impact, and he's concerned about peace and security. The minority, during the press conference over the weekend, they argued that the Speaker has not been provided the ruling from the Supreme Court, hence they still maintain their majority status. The reason why they're acting this way today. But then we heard from Afenyo Markin, he says that the bailiff have actually presented the ruling from the Supreme Court to the legal department. What's your thoughts about this whole back and forth?
You know, Professor Ening makes a point. He's talking, I mean, he talks about the peace and security of this country, which is very important. And I'm sure Professor Ening would agree that, look, what we're experiencing, and it's, you've seen how the NPP group, let me say NPP group now, because
right now we cannot even tell who is who.
I mean, no, if I want to, well, you can tell who is who if you want to. So, I mean, it's not a big deal. If I refer to the NPP as majority, it's not a big deal because they've gone to court, and my position has been to respect the decision of the court. I'm not going to run away from a position I have taken. And when the Speaker indicated at the time that the NDC represent the majority, we call them the majority.
Yeah.
And so if the court says that cannot be the case, we've said that, and I've made the point that you can disagree with the court. But my preamble always to a conversation about the judiciary is that it's the only in some form of a showdown. And we're having a conversation. When we saw the military initially, I said, you don't need the military, but we've been subsequently been told that they were there to sweep, the dome, having been invited by the Speaker of Parliament. That settles it. But this is it for me. At this point in time, it's the most important conversation in this country. A conversation about who constitutes the majority or minority.
The reason why both the NDC and NPP
My dear,
have occupied the majority seats in Parliament.
The NDC majority or the NDC minority cannot take any decision, cannot pass any law which will be binding on anybody. After all, you are with the president's assent, true or false?
True.
If the president doesn't assent to it, what are you going to do? Are you going to impeach the president? You don't have the numbers. So what you're going to do is just to actually galvanize your party supporters at best, your core party supporters at best, whom we all know are not enough to win any political party an election. So, yes, I mean, for the optics, it may look nice that, because the NDC had the belief that they should have been the majority right from the beginning. They felt that they had alleged some arm twisting here and there. You may want to say that, finally we are majority. But the whole talk about, we are going to repeal the e-levy, we'll repeal the betting tax, so that who would assent to it for you? You repeal the e-levy, I would be happy. But the truth is that the president, this being part of his fiscal plans for the year, is he going to assent to it? I am particularly happy that the NPP side took a decision not to go there to go and fight. I don't know, because you had 5 of their members there earlier. Yeah. And you had seen Raymond Frank Anodompre going in there, grabbing his seat. And I had expected that, all of them were going to show up, which for me would have been problematic. So, look, at the end of the day, our members of parliament, they should be listening to the conversations people are having. Professor Ening has made a point. Today, beyond elections, what does our democracy deliver to us? We don't think about that. All we think about is that we have elections and somebody comes into office and that's the end of it. I am concerned because I ask myself that in future, how are my children and grandchildren going to judge this generation of ours? Would they look at me and say, oh, grandpa or daddy, you did well? Or they look at me and say that, grandpa, you failed us and that's why we find ourselves in this situation? Members of parliament should be concerned. They should by now be having a conversation on how a bipartisanship approach should be taken in the fight against illegal mining. Are they concerned about that? Is the most pressing need in this country today who constitutes the majority in parliament? I am sorry, but I'm not convinced about what the pressing need of this country is. And so here we are today. I am happy. There's no scuffle in parliament. If the speaker comes and says the NDC is the majority, if he comes and says the NPP is the majority, we move. At the end of the day, let these members of parliament remember that they were voted into office to actually seek the welfare and well-being of their people. They were not voted into office to engage in extreme partisanship, as we have seen in this country. They should be disappointed in themselves, all of them.
Raymond Akwa, let me bring you in at this point, because this whole back and forth between the NPP caucus and the NDC caucus in Parliament, we've heard from Afenyo Marking saying that they are leaving the floor of Parliament to their offices, hoping that the Speaker of Parliament would resolve these issues and also uphold the Supreme Court's ruling. He also lets us know that the bailiff of the Supreme Court has served the legal department of Parliament the ruling. Should the Speaker fail to adhere to this ruling, what happens next?
In principle, what would be somebody citing the Speaker of Parliament for contempt and who compelling the Speaker to appear in court in person to answer the concerns of contempt, being committed to jail for not complying with that. I think that will be pushing the boundaries of this conversation to an extreme end. What I suspect may happen is the Speaker will come in and resolve this matter by saying, well, let the will of the court prevail for now, even if I disagree with it, even if I think it's nonsensical, even if I do not believe the content of that particular ruling reflects modern day law, or even what's supposed to be. I don't know if you get my point. So that's what I expect would happen. I do not, and Bagbin can be radical sometimes. I do not expect that his level of radicalism would extend to saying, to hell with what the Supreme Court has said. At best, what they will say is, oh, I've not seen it. I am still operating until I get some understanding of what it means and all of those other things. That, for him to throw it out and say it would never be used in this house will be a bit strange. But it's not out of the picture, mindful of how partisan we have become as a people. Mindful of, because what will be is he will be flagrantly disrespecting another branch. And I talked about checks and balances. The reason why that theory is important is because one ought to limit the other. If he finds that the conduct of the Supreme Court here was not only limiting but encroaching on the powers of Parliament in whichever form, he will state that categorically. But I don't think he will go as far as saying, I am not going to comply at all with what you're saying, or I'm not going to effect this. And let's get something very clear. Bagby knew he could have pronounced changes in the House, but he didn't, after his ruling previously. Because a more tactical approach will be how to manage that situation. After all, how many months to the end of this particular parliament that they are making noise of? I hope you get my point. So I think
let me come in at
cooler
this
heads
point.
will prevail.
Yeah.
More likely from the Speaker's perspective. He may disagree with the Supreme Court, but still say, I'm staying my hand, awaiting further engagement on the matter.
Let me bring in Professor Kwesieni at this point. The NDC caucus in Parliament, they've advanced the argument that the Supreme Court erred in its ruling because it lacks jurisdiction. They quote Article 99 of the Constitution. It says that the High Court has jurisdiction to hear and determine any question as to whether a person has been validly elected as a member of Parliament or the seat of a member of Parliament has become vacant. Should the Speaker fail to adhere to the Supreme Court ruling, would he be right?
Look, I think the conversation now moves beyond, these institutions, and particularly the Speaker today standing his grounds to argue that, look, I also have the right to say A, B, C, D. My understanding of this, and I think one of your previous speakers made this point very strongly, is that all these individuals are in service to the people of Ghana. That when there is a national crisis, that discernment, maturity, humility in the search for what is best for the people that they lead is what should govern and direct their behavior. In interpreting these articles, and I think one of them made this point too, that had the Supreme Court also empaneled different judges, probably we could also have gotten a different decision. So whatever takes place today when the speaker comes in must be looked at through the larger lens of what is good for Ghana. An unnecessarily strict, stiff, narrow interpretation of what is on paper will not serve this country well. And we are at a tipping point on a very sharp knife edge. I am hoping that whatever decision the speaker makes will be one that resolves the tension. Because we don't have long to go. And for people and in the village where I am doing field work, these are esoteric conversations that doesn't impact on the price of the basic foodstuffs that they cannot even afford. But they will be very happy to strike a blow at everybody that they think has contributed to bringing this country to its knees. We should not get there. So I think it's useful for us to have these conversations. Hopefully they are listening to us, as one of your speakers said, and it may help them to get a sense, which I think they know already, of the discomfort and unhappiness and dissatisfaction with where they have brought this country. I think there's collective failure in how and why we have gotten here. And we need maturity, leadership, and discernment to get us out of the hole in which every minute that goes, we are digging ourselves much deeper. I've studied political violence for the past 40 years. It's easy to begin that very slippery, easy slope into disagreement and eventually conflict. Coming out of it is difficult. And with the changing international order, no one is going to spare us a thought. Let's be guided by what is in our bigger national interest. Let's be guided by what is happening elsewhere, which the international community does not seem to care about. And in terms of our geostrategic importance, on that list of geostrategic hierarchy, we are at the very bottom, and no one will care about it. For the sake of our children, ourselves, and our children's children, let's be guided by our love for Ghana and the discernment of what any misstep might lead us into.
For Ghana, you say we should be guided by, and I have in the studio Evans Mensah, he's head of our political desk. This whole back and forth is all because of the game of numbers. The standing orders of Parliament, it's clear. Order 109 speaks about the majority rule, and that is why the NDC, they are holding on to the majority status because they are still living by the Speaker's initial verdict. They claim that the Speaker has not communicated to them the new ruling from Parliament. Hence, they still operate by the Speaker's ruling, which has declared the 4 seats vacant. In this game of numbers, is the NDC right?
This game of numbers, so far, I think there are no winners. Our democracy has been severely tested and is under strain as we speak. Nobody knows how today is going to end. The Speaker really holds the final, I guess, say on this particular matter, whether or not we are entering into a constitutional crisis or we are going to come out of this as a stronger democracy. We would have learned the lessons from this. And I've read the CDD statement that actually invites us to look at the constitutional provisions that has led us here for further clarity down the line. The NDC and the MPP sides in Parliament will do what politicians do. They will follow the dictates. And that's why you've seen today the busing of party supporters to the precincts of Parliament, because this is partisan politics. And that is how both sides are going to be interpreting the Constitution. Now, the thing though, we need to reserve some comments for the Speaker, because our constitutional integrity is within his hands. There's never been a day, I believe, in our Fourth Republican history, even before this, that a Speaker, all eyes are on the Speaker. This great country of ours, in terms of where we are in this juncture, his decision, when he walks in very shortly, will decide quite a lot. Will decide whether, because you have party supporters around the precinct, often when you're going to have chaos, we've seen the parliamentarians themselves fighting among themselves in the House. But considering that in the precinct of Parliament we have party supporters, and yesterday, if anybody followed, there was intelligence that the NDC2 was, attempting to bus supporters to the venue, and that they had asked every member of Parliament to marshal at least 200 supporters to the precinct, and I believe that's possibly the MPP2 had planned that, and we've seen that they've delivered their numbers there. That is the danger, and the Speaker should be aware of this. I'm very, very certain, and yesterday I got a sense, a confirmation, that statesmen had reached out to him, not only to him. There's a coalition of eminent Ghanaians that had come together. They tried to reach him and to mediate between himself and the Chief Justice. Try to get some outcome that will inure to the benefit of this great country and our democracy. I don't know how successful this has been, but we will see what he says.
Well, let me come in at this point, Evans. News reaching us is that the Speaker has asked his lawyers to file an action in the Supreme Court to stay the Supreme Court's order. And that's just coming in from our Parliamentary Affairs correspondent, Kweku Asante. We'll take you to Parliament shortly, but Evans, please make your point. Yeah,
but that's the point. I mean, that developing story is important. That is the right thing to do. That is the only course of action that a democracy is expected to chart. And we shouldn't follow what happened in Capitol in the U.S., where a certain president marches people to the Capitol Hill and led to violence that led to people's dying. We can show the way, and so if he sent his lawyers to the Supreme Court to set this injunction aside, is the right thing to do. Now, it actually then places the burden back on the Supreme Court, because the expeditious nature that they approached the first application with. Now we want to see if they're going to apply the same expedition to this application also.
Same day, same day.
Yes.
Dealt with dispatch. Supreme Court 5-member panel assembled on Friday to deal with the matter expeditiously.
When it was filed on Thursday.
Yeah. So it will be interesting. I mean, I agree with you. It's an interesting development. That's if it's filed today. Will the Supreme Court be able to equally assemble? Because the presidency have said, and there's a demand they can also make. And I've heard lawyers say,
they must assemble and say.
Yes, yeah. If you don't do that, you send a different signal to everybody.
So this is interesting. There's another part of this developing story that it's important. That our correspondent in Parliament is clarifying that his understanding is that this process that the Speaker has asked to be filed may be filed before proceedings begin.
Today.
And the Speaker takes his chair. And I think that is signaling something very clearly. Once it is filed, he can come to the House and says it has...
Nothing should be done to offend the import of that particular
until it is
filing.
decided.
So it returns to, I mean, it's status quo ante, right?
Absolutely.
Original declaration that he made.
Stands.
Except that the stay that was agreed, that the court agreed to, was to stop him from making those seats vacant. So the 4 members of parliament can walk in today and go and sit in their seat.
That's true.
If the speaker says, I have filed, and by you coming to sit in your seat, you are really defeating the purpose of me filing.
So you
this
can't sit in your
You can't sit in your seat.
Which,
it will be an interesting
Wait for me, the fact that our correspondent adds that second bit, and of course, once the speaker's direction to his lawyers is that I'm waiting for you to file.
Yeah.
He could have gone in there and sat and of course did his work.
Start the day, yeah.
But once he asks that, go and file before I get in, clearly you know where this is going. He's going to come and say, that because I have filed.
The good thing about this is that you're using law to solve a problem created by law.
Yes, you see. No, which is on the face of it, a very sensible. We were afraid. We were afraid that it was going to be 2 institutions head on.
This is
disregarding.
This is a sensible thing to do. If the speaker does that, it means that and even if he comes out to say, because of that, my understanding is that these persons cannot come. That's his understanding because he's resorted to the courts to actually set aside the court's own ruling. While you wait for the court, and we say justice must not only be served, but must be seen as being served, we also now will begin to count down on when the Supreme Court is going to come out and say, okay, we're going to listen to your case. Because if the Supreme Court could do it in the case of the NPP, you expect that they should be able to do it in the case of the Speaker. No problem. But at least, the good thing is that the Speaker, if this is anything he's going to do, is resorting to the courts in dealing with the challenges that the courts may have put in his way. And for me, that's the way to go.
You said the law to fight the law. I'll come back in studio, but let me bring in Dr. Kojo Asante with CDD. We're just getting an update from Parliament that the Speaker has asked his lawyers, to file an action in the Supreme Court to stay the order of the Supreme Court. You have been calling for cool heads to prevail. What's your thoughts about how things have panned out in Parliament this morning?
Good morning. Yes, I think that is what needed to be done because I think the worry was for the Speaker to ignore the directions of the Supreme Court. That would have been unprecedented because that would have been the Parliament of Ghana ignoring directions from the Supreme Court. And that signal would have been really problematic. It would have been completely unprecedented in the annals of the Fourth Republic. And so that needed to be avoided. Whatever the objections were or disagreements with the judgment of the Supreme Court, the intervention of the Supreme Court, the only recourse was to use that same process to challenge the Supreme Court's own actions. And I think one of the options was to apply to set it aside or to go ahead and file the statement of case as had been instructed by the Supreme Court. And so I think this is the right move, and then everything else would flow from there. And I think that would help at least resolve matters in the interim and direct Parliament appropriately.
We've been hearing from Professor Kwesi Enin this morning, and he argues that the conduct of our MPs in the House is clearly in blatant disregard of law and order. They say that they create the laws, but they fail to respect them. How do you feel we can allow cool heads to prevail in Parliament post this event?
I mean, even in terms of parliamentary practice, I've been really surprised by this whole behavior of the caucuses, because really the issue about minority and majority. So given the Speaker's ruling on Thursday, even if there was a change or a change in the balance of power in Parliament, it had to be communicated by the Speaker as such. There was all this back and forth. Even there were times where MPs were challenging or calling out journalists for not referring to them as. But that is not a formal process. That has to be communicated by the Speaker that henceforth this person is Mr. Majority or Mr. Minority, and that this, because that is how it is done. It doesn't just come out of thin air because a vacancy has occurred, and therefore automatically everybody can hold themselves up or can go and sit left or right. If you recall, when we went through the process in 2021, there was a formal process where the side that had the numbers, once it was determined, would communicate to the Speaker that this is our leader. And the Speaker would communicate that this is the majority leader, this is the minority leader. And then everybody accorded the person the right, titles. So how anybody could be going around just, declaring that I am majority, minority, and therefore acting in this kind of way, I found it really, really strange, and it's completely unnecessary. And even in terms of the court case, given the timelines that the Supreme Court gave, 7 days for statement of case, 7 days for joint memorandum of issues to be settled, within 10, 14 days, this matter could have been clarified, and then whatever procedures of Parliament that are needed to be addressed would have been addressed. Why couldn't anybody wait for these things to be addressed? And with all these things, I am a bit surprised because 10 days will not, for me, take away anybody's rights or anything within that period. So just restraining ourselves and holding on to allow for some clarity, because there has been a lot of opinion as to jurisdiction, correct interpretation, which are all matters of law that needed to be clarified, which the Supreme Court at the end will still be the best place to go to get those interpretations done. So I think some of this conduct really has been a lot of, much ado about nothing, really. And we hope that even now we would sort of allow the process to take its rightful course. There are real matters of law that must be addressed. In our statement, we also made the point that we really need to look at the issue about disqualification of, people close to elections, because you leave them with no remedy. When Jesse Kwesi was disqualified, at least you could have a by-election. When you do that close to election, where 90 days before elections, you cannot hold by-election. There's no remedy.
That's what the Constitution says. You cannot
hold
elections.
Exactly. So there are all these challenges within the Constitution that we need to address so that it doesn't create these challenges, politically and in terms of our governance for us.
We've been hearing from
looking to the future.
We've been hearing from the MPP caucus leader, Alexander Fayo-Markin, this morning. He just clarified for us that indeed the bailiff has served the legal department of Parliament with the Supreme Court's ruling. Now the Speaker has also directed his lawyers to file another case staying the Supreme Court's order. How will this pan out?
Well, there has to be a hearing, of course, because an application to set this aside, and this time certainly it cannot be ex parte, because, given the gravity of the issue, this is a matter that everybody should be heard, and should be heard expeditiously, so that could be addressed. Then the Speaker will make a choice once the decision can be made, whether to set it aside, because I believe the Speaker is making the case that in reality he has not made any decision.
But is the Speaker compelled to actually uphold the initial ruling from the Supreme Court, bearing in mind that his lawyers are going to actually ask for a stay of execution of that order? Is he compelled to do that?
Well, the point is that if you have applied to set aside a direction of the Supreme Court, then just by implication, you have recognized that the Supreme Court has made a judgment, a decision. So I think that is moot. I mean, that's not an argument really to be contested. By making the application, you've recognized, and that is proper for Parliament to do.
So per the Supreme Court's ruling, the NPP caucus in Parliament is still the majority. Let's come in the studio. Could you stay with me and just get Winston Amoah, you were making a point about this. Now, I'm wondering, with the Speaker filing this news suit, asking for a stay of execution, it also means that he has acknowledged receipt of the initial ruling from the Supreme Court. What happens next?
Well, I mean, I have told you that the Speaker, is a lawyer, right? And once they are served, at this point in time, the Speaker would only do what he believes is right. And lawyers have different terms they use. And so he's resorted to what he thinks works for him. And that's why he's also staying. The next interpretation he puts on it is what we'll all find out, okay? If that becomes a situation, that means, okay, so the status quo remains per his ruling, or there's other one, we will find out. Because today, the lawyers have themselves become confused as to what is permissible and what is not permissible under the laws of this country. So let's just wait. I mean, my point always is that for the legal questions, let's wait. The Speaker would come out. Once he comes out to announce his next line of action, because what we are faced with right now, for me, the most important thing is that if the Speaker also files a case at the Supreme Court, the same speed that was used in hearing the NPP case should be used in hearing the Speaker's case, okay? So that we move. And, Kodra Asante had made the point earlier that, this is something that could have been dealt with in a 10-day period, and so you probably didn't have to rush into a decision, something that I would associate with. All I want to say is that the judiciary is a key arm of government. And at no point in this country should the judiciary not be trusted by the citizenry, contrary to what the Afrobarometer is telling us. So I am concerned about that. And so now, that is why I say the judiciary should actually take steps to get the trust of the people. And it starts today. It starts today because the same speed must apply to this one. And then at the end of the day, the rule on the case, we will find, whoever it favors can go on a review. Why not? Then we move on in this country. But as I've always indicated, as to who constitutes the majority or minority is not a pressing thing of this country. Okay, elections are 2 months away. As to who is in the majority or who is in the minority, it is not something that is going to change anything, because we operate a system that at the end of the day, every law that you even pass must be assented to by the president. We've seen the president even not assenting to a private member's bill, which has to go back to Parliament, and the Speaker unhappy with it. So this is, yes, to galvanize party core base. Well, that's something that political parties would take advantage of. But for those of us who are watching, I think that much ado about nothing, really.
Is that the case, Raymond? Much ado about nothing?
Yes, when it comes to who sits where. I mean, see, the very things that, and I heard the claims that, oh, we repeal the e-levy. We will do the things that with our power we couldn't do. Yes, I'm waiting to see how that plays out properly in this Parliament and how that's going to be done. Because how they have operated generally has been that government brings business, then the leadership who represents government would actually be the one pushing that business on the floor. These things will come through other ends, and it's very possible to do so. You recall that Ras Mubarak in his last days in Parliament got some amendments to laws, and one of those were the earliest times we have used this private members bill theory properly in our Parliament. I get that. But I also think that, again, we are not having the bigger conversations about state 2 months to the election at this time. I think political parties are more concentrated on who wins what. And to me, it's becoming very, and as Bryce Simmons has said before, we are not taking advantage of these crises First, the crisis on the economy and its related debt exchange programs, and subsequently even to do with illegal mining and the things that flow from that, to make corrections that are long-standing, to make corrections that impact the future of this country more positively. I will be very excited if both minority and majority MPs are up in arms over dealings with Galamsey and how well or how poorly we are fighting this menace, even in the current renewed or additional enforcement that we have put out there. But when it appears that you are seeking to score political points for your parochial partisan interest, you leave out the majority of the people in this country who really do not care about the political point scoring. I hope you get the point. So that is where my difficulty is. That's why I agree with when he says it's much ado about nothing. And frankly, if you do this positioning, and let me just hope against hope that when you change the positions, and it means that every wrong that has been done in the last God knows how long, you're able to correct that, I'll back you. I'll be very excited that you are taking over the reins now and taking over parliamentary control and doing what is right. But we know that's less likely to happen. So in effect, we are just having a conversation in a vacuum, a conversation that really does not count much. When we could have spent the same amount of time, energy, and even resources doing equally important things, when we could have been having Parliament on a standstill over illegal mining, over other important things. I've said this before. In Jamaica, even businesses made better engagements on the way forward after their debt exchange and economic crisis. They said it was no longer the time was up for politicians to make decisions forever without anybody influencing that, and then they'll share the debt with the Vice Minister and co. That business was not going to happen again. They made very massive changes to that. In the Republic of Ghana today, I have seen tokenism, very little promises around that. I think that our leaders and Parliament is where our direct representatives are. The people that a constituency in Gabon of over 120,000 would actually vote for. That is where their representative sits. I'm expecting them to make some of these changes or lead it. Not long ago, before he was removed as majority leader, Sechi Mensah Bonsu had constituted a team to look into the constitution and look at other things that ought to be done to make permanent changes to our political structure in ways that affect some of these things that we are having difficulties with. Where is that work? How far have they gone with it? How relevant is that in the scheme of affairs when you have 2 months to leave that house? If they are legacy driven and not the next election driven, those things will be paramount. But as we have it, and as Mensah said, it is realpolitik. Who wins the points in politics here appears to be the ultimate aim for their engagement.
Something we haven't assessed. What are we waiting for? We're waiting for the speaker.
Exactly.
We need to assess the sort of things he's thinking about right now. The factors that are weighing on his mind right now as he's considering what to do. We have an indication what he might do. One, that he has asked his lawyers to go to the Supreme Court to set aside the Supreme Court's own injunction. That's one. Secondly, that he actually may be waiting for that to be filed. And by the way, that's the thing that we need to condemn. The fact whoever asked these party paraphernalia wearing folks to storm Parliament, this is irresponsible.
Totally unnecessary.
It has
They're busting, actually.
They were busting. We saw the buses actually driving past here before they got to Parliament. I mean, the MPP leadership must, in fact, not condemn, we must condemn the MPP leadership for doing this, because somebody definitely put them in a bus and drove them there, gave them party T-shirts to wear, and entered the inner prison of Parliament. And the question really is, why they even allow them to walk through the gates of Parliament? It is a big question. I mean, of course, we know they are meeting on the other side of the street, but that area is still a security zone. And we've been told since yesterday that they are tightening up security in the area why did the police allow them to march in and walk in the way they've done? So where are they? Are they still in the precinct? Is a question we need to ask. I want to come back to the
and
point.
we'll go to Maxwell Agbagba shortly because
Give us
he's
some
outside
clarity on
the
what is
precincts of
happening there.
Parliament.
I mean,
Just
so
give us a sense
this
of
must
what
be
is happening.
condemned in uncertain terms. I mean, the mobilization of MPP supporters to get to Parliament today for whatever. So why are they going there? What for? MPs, your representatives, were going to meet to deliberate. Nobody knew the outcome. If I saw the NDC guys, I would have said the same thing.
If they were originally slated to be in the gallery, was it possible?
No, the statement from the Parliament was clear. That the public gallery, there'll be nobody allowed in the public gallery to further notice. It was very, very clear. And so,
and they're getting close to it
anyway. And who
This
allowed
was
them?
earlier.
And you see security officers watching them just walk by, and this is a security threat. I mean, and you also have to call into question.
Is it a protest?
That's my point. It's completely unnecessary. What was this for? In the morning, yeah. This was in the morning, yeah. This was morning. The buses came, and of course, our reporters on the ground saw them, getting there. We'll deal with this when today is over. But we're now waiting for the speaker to come in. And I'm saying that one of the things we need to assess is the consideration that the speaker is making. Is he making partisan political considerations? Or is he making considerations of law and the Constitution? He's played his hand a bit. Now we know one of the things he's done is that one of his considerations is obviously the law. That's why he's asked his lawyers to go to the Supreme Court. That's fine. But for me, the partisan political undertones cannot be dismissed. We are just over 40 days to the elections. On December 7th, midnight of December 7, 2025, there'll be an election of a new speaker. January 7, 2025. There will be an election of a new speaker. Whatever the outcome of the elections, if the NDC wins, if you are Speaker Bagbin, you would want to be considered for another term, right? Is it possible that is part of his consideration? It's a question it's a fair question to ask. Is it possible that is part of his consideration?
Of course,
that I need to prove my loyalty to my political party as part of this whole process of deciding what happens
let me
next.
Just make the point, because currently, Fitch predicted an NDC victory. You have the Global Info Analytics predicting an NDC victory. Looks like the momentum is with the NDC, but of course, 40 days is a long time in politics. Anything can happen. But if you are Speaker Bagbin, you certainly would have your eyes on the 2024 elections and what could happen. If you were to ask NDC members of Parliament, there are a lot of them who would actually tell you that, this Speaker, well, he's better than Michael Quay, but not as we expected. And you've heard the Speaker make the point that he's Speaker for the whole of Ghana, for Ghana's Parliament, and not an NDC Speaker. And so he would try to apply the law. And to be fair to Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin, he's done that well. At least when it comes to partisanship, he's not as partisan as Professor Michael Quay. That one, you give it to him.
There are times that he stayed in the middle.
Yes.
And he has started sharp.
There are times that he actually incurred the wrath of the minority.
Yes.
He's called a tyrant by his own people.
Yes, we've seen that happening. And isn't it interesting that the man who started this whole debate was a man who was removed as minority leader, Haruna Idrisu. Also at the time that his party had questioned him here and there. So you can actually see, read in between that, you can reasonably infer that all that is happening is also an attempt by some persons to get themselves into the good books of their political party, which they believe...
Rededicate themselves.
Yes, rededicate themselves to the cause which they believe the political party is likely to win the elections. So you cannot take away the partisanship question. It's a very legitimate question to ask, an analysis you can make. But of course, there's the legal aspect. But beyond partisanship, you must always find something within
but
the legal aspect is where I'm coming
but
to,
that is
Evans.
also where the legal point. That's also where you can actually manipulate the law.
Of course, to suit your whims and caprices.
Some have said it's just like how people, hermeneutics is biblical interpretation. It's just like how people can interpret the Bible in ways that sometimes are absurd. It is the same with law. 50 lawyers can sit and review a provision and come to very different conclusions. Some would abuse it, others would stay fidelity to the law. That's allowed. Of course, that's also why we have institutions that are supposed to resolve the problem. My point here is that I agree they are, and mostly I term them as the manifest and latent reasons for conduct. It appears on the face of it, Speaker Michael Speaker Aban's backbench is saying that, well, this is the position of the law and I believe in it and all of that, and I'll fight it to the end. On the other hand, there is good reason to believe that Speaker, being also a politician, mindful of his stay in office, and mindful of the fact that an 8-year speakership will be an interesting perspective under him. And I am waiting to see how, if indeed the NDC wins the election, hope you get what I'm trying to say, how he would operate.
Reverend, let me come in at this point and just give our audience watching on all our platforms. This is live on Joy Prime, and we're just receiving news that the Speaker of Parliament will take his chair shortly. The MPs, we are told, have taken their seats originally, meaning the MPP caucus in Parliament on the majority side and the NDC caucus in Parliament on the minority side. We're looking forward to how that will play out. But Raymond, this paints a bigger picture of the whole power tussle between the judiciary and the legislature, isn't it?
No, I actually think that, see, this is a needless tussle, really. The idea that one will check the other would always bring some slight confrontations. And everybody knows that. If somebody has to limit your powers, it has to be through some form of confrontation. And somebody ought to be able to tell the...
Raymond Akwa, I can see on our shots now Haruna Idrisu, the former minority leader, and Kennedy Ejapon having a conversation there. They're smiling. It appears something's going on there. Let's come back in studio, Raymond.
Politicians would always have a conversation. I mean, beyond what you see on the cameras, sometimes, you know, I think that if you are the NDC, what you wanted was to be seen on the majority side. They've achieved that, okay? And once they achieve that on the majority side, it's victory for them. The NPP, you heard from Afenyu Marking, he's made the point. He thinks that the Speaker would abide by the ruling of the Supreme Court, and they are not going to do anything that could affect, you know, the integrity of Parliament and, by extension, the state. So at this point in time, they can have their own conversations. I mean, we just have to wait for the Speaker. For me, at this point, we just have to wait for the Speaker. Everything we're talking about now, the decision rests on only one man. That's Speaker Alban Bagbin. And whatever he says, we will know.
And I'm hoping that he's equally mindful that whatever he does will also affect the future of this country in very different forms.
Yeah.
Like the way today we are basically debating Speaker Michael Quay's ruling, and some agreeing and some disagreeing and some having difficulties with it. Your actions within government, especially in responsible positions like this, and he should be mindful. And I like quoting Article 296 to our leaders, because sometimes they forget that the Constitution insists that they should act in the performance of their discretionary powers in a fair, candid, and reasonable manner. Those words, they hold true meaning. They are reasonable words. It expresses that you will not be capricious and arbitrary in your decision making. That's the expectation we have of not only the judiciary, but also the occupant of that seat we are seeing on the TV now. The Speaker of Parliament is a very powerful person. We do not expect him to put partisanship ahead of the collective interest of the people of this country. And that will be betraying our cause. Because, again, the idea of public service is that people put their personal interest first. That it's a form of sacrifice. It's difficult to put your personal interest aside. Even if Speaker Bagbin is going to lose the next speakership, he should be interested in the legacy he's leaving. He should be interested in what his children and grandchildren and their progeny will read about him.
And I'll come back to you, Raymond, for that point you were making just on the legacy the Speaker is leaving. But let's take you to Parliament. In fact, my colleague Benjamin Akpakpo is outside Parliament. He's just monitoring the situation. Earlier, we brought you visuals of some supporters of the NPP bussed to the precinct of Parliament. Benjamin, what can you report?
Well, Faustina, indeed, I am here. It's the makeshift parliament, if you want. This is actually the premises of the Accra International Conference Center, where today's session will take place. The Speaker of Parliament, just about 10 minutes ago, arrived here, he's going to use the rear entrance to get in. But that is the entrance. You can see Madam Tete, Honorable Tete, for example, getting ready to go through the scanning machine and get in. And some of the members of parliament are in there. Initially, some of the members of the NPP walked away, citing the fact that they were awaiting the arrival of the speaker to know what the way forward would be. Some members of the NDC remained in there. Some of them came out to have some refreshment, but by and large, most of them are seated now. The speaker will soon take his seat, and then we'll find out how things go. So for now, in that chamber with the tight security and everything that you see there, that is what is happening. And soon the speaker will start the session, will commence this session in Parliament. And when I say Parliament today, the chamber is on the precincts of the Accra International Conference Center.
Benjamin, clarify for me, the NPP supporters, are they still in Parliament?
Well, as far as looking around is concerned, I do not see any of them here. Initially, when I went to park around Parliament proper, right across the street, I saw a few pockets of people there. There was a heavy military presence, there was a heavy police presence, but none of these members of the NPP clad in party attire and wielding party paraphernalia that we saw earlier in the morning. No sign of them as of now. I am not sure where exactly they have gone, but they are definitely not here at the Accra International Conference Center.
Thank you, Benjamin. We'll come back to you for updates on what's actually happening. And also, we'll put on your screen shortly live visuals from Parliament, just so you can get a sense of what is happening. We told you that the MPs, they've taken their seats in the original position. Earlier, Afenyo Markin, the leader of the NPP caucus in Parliament, addressed a press conference. He said that their side decided to leave the House to the offices as they await the Speaker to do, quote, the right thing. What is the right thing now that the Speaker has also filed another suit in court, hoping to stay the execution of the Supreme Court's ruling? Raymond, I'm back to you in the studio. You were just making the point about this whole power tussle.
Yes, I'm saying the ultimate engagement on this, and I mean, see, I agree that there will be disagreements. The entire conception of state would have it that in constitutionalism, there's the expectation that you have limited powers, and that limited powers ought to be checked by another institution in a way that you cannot abuse that. I am expecting the Speaker to work in mindful of the fact that he's making history and that he will be judged fairly or poorly depending on what he says and what he does in this seat. Will Speaker Bagby be swayed more by partisan, personal, parochial interest, or he will be swayed by the ultimate interest of the Republic? We'll be very lucky if the two coincide and are one in this particular case. So we should be interested in hearing whether or not Speaker is more concerned about his legacy, the man who fostered and built and developed Ghana's democracy, even to his personal detriment, or against his interest and that of his political followers, or his political party, or political thinking, as against he making sure that he protects a future job, or protects some form of alliance and allegiance that he's supposed to owe to the team. Because the allegiance is first and foremost to the people who gave him the job. That is we, the people of this country. In fact, sovereignty lies with the people. We, the people, we have given him a job to do. The expectation is that he will deliver that according to the standards expected of him. And he's a man who has advanced in age. Mostly, I think of such people as being more conscious of their legacy more than any other grouping in this particular case. Would he let that be represented in his action today? And if he does so, his name will be etched in gold in our history as the man who put the interest of the nation ahead of personal, parochial, or any other interest that may supersede, even when he is likely to incur the wrath of his own people. And this is not the first time we have done so anyway. Speaker Bagby has, on some occasions, delivered judgments that really went against his own people in ways that they didn't like one bit. And again, he insisted it was for the collective interest of this republic. We are hoping that not only he will do that, the judiciary will take a cue from that. What they will do in that case is repairing the collective image of politics in Ghana. They are not just, you see, and I said it earlier, people are losing hope in this concept that we call democracy. The evidence is in the Afrobarometer. Of course, it's not only happening in Ghana. It's happening in other African countries. But the commonalities are there. Poor governance is at the core of it. So if you do not show signs that you are evolving in your governance space, people will leave you behind. They will lose hope in it. They will think and even conceive the options of other alternatives on the table. Again, for an institution like the judiciary, which is in the top bottom of trust, this is a perfect time for you to regain that. And if all of these people were minded, we will not be sitting here today, in all fairness. If every state actor was mindful of that constitutional dictate, fair, candid, and reasonable,
let me bring him, Evan Spencer, at this point. We're all looking at what would be in best interest of the people and the country as we're looking forward to the Speaker's verdict. Let's go back in the annals of history. This was the first time where we're having issues with who exactly is majority with the NDC and the MPP side.
I mean, we had that shortly after the elections in 2020, when we had this hung parliament of 137, and then we had the independent candidate. We had that too at the time. For the very first, if you remember, they went to the House, and everybody was not sure where to sit, and that lingered for about 2 weeks. Even for journalists, we couldn't describe them. The same thing that we had with Afenyo attacking us and saying that when you call the when you call Haruna Idrisu at the time, the minority leader, he says it's not minority leader, and so we just resorted to say NDC group, and that's the first time we started calling them NDC group, and of course it's now. So we've had this before. The reasons then were obvious. In the Fourth Republic, obviously, we've not had that even numbers in the House. With one split right to the middle with one independent candidate. So it was understandable. We were all in uncharted territory at the time, and it was resolved. I believe the Speaker gave...
No, by the same Speaker.
Same Speaker.
He gave a ruling that sort of clarified the matter, and we went on. The NDC side were very unhappy with him at the time, but it clarified the matter. We've come back to the point where, again, we await his decision on this. I think we can fairly predict what he's coming to say. I think we can fairly predict.
What's your prediction?
I dare say, on the evidence of what our parliamentary correspondent had clarified to us, which is that he's asked his lawyer to go to the Supreme Court to file to stay its own injunction. And then the point that he won't sit until that has been filed. He could have simply come and said, I have instructed that. Whilst I'm waiting for this, I respect the Supreme Court, I disagree with it, but I'll wait for this outcome, which is what lawyers say, and he's a lawyer, right? He could have come and said that. But if it's indeed a fact, and that he has said also that he's waiting for it to be filed before he comes in, it means one thing for me, which means he's coming to refer to the fact that he's begun a process in the Supreme Court, and now whilst that process is pending,
his initial ruling stands
until the determination of that particular matter also. That's what I'm predicting will happen. Now, that obviously, I mean, that is the law, by the way, but people disagree with that view. Whether a mere process to set aside an existing order of a court serves as an injunction is a highly contested subject in jurisprudence. There are two different sides of this, sometimes even three, right? But he's taking one side. Obviously, you can expect that the minority side, the MPP's group, will take the other side. But at least,
Hold on, no. You remember when Afenyo Make filed his case at the courts?
That argument was made too.
Yes, it became one of the contentions that, and I thought we had moved beyond that. But people actually picked other situations out and said, listen, let's distinguish it. This is Parliament. If every filing of an individual in court prevents Parliament from carrying out its duty, Parliament will never get any work done. Then they advance it in those lines, almost convincing some other people that the applicability can be varied depending on the conditions here. You can be rest assured. If the Speaker makes the argument, they are going to say the opposite of
course,
it.
Of course.
No. We still got to do our work. The original position
but at least it leaves us in a better position than if he had not filed this and come to this to sit in the chair and say, I disrespect. Not disrespect, but
I'm disregarding.
You know, but again, he would have still, reading his initial judgment, used the same constitution the Standing Orders,
Yeah.
the Parliament Act, to make his case.
That's true.
He would have simply said, and if you read his initial judgment, he makes the point that the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution. He is applying it.
Yeah.
He makes that distinction. And he would have said, I still, and today if you listen to Tony Edu, Tony Edu makes the point to you both that the Speaker was simply applying the law, and the subject of interpretation was
There was no need for the
was invented.
Well, I mean,
was invented.
He has talked about no need because the English is very clear, but that's his view.
No, but that if you read the ruling of the Speaker, that's the Speaker's position.
But that's the reason.
So he could have come today and said, well,
Evans, what is the?
But do you know the interesting part?
What's the reason for? I mean, for you resorting to a court? Because I disagree. I say this is my understanding. That's your understanding.
Even agreeing on whether this is an application or an interpretation ought to be determined by a court if there is a dispute over it. I hope you get the point. So if you support Speaker and say you are merely applying, and I think he had veered into that area, we ought to submit ourselves to a body that is qualified in determining whether or not the Speaker merely applied or interpreted that. I don't know if you get the point.
There are things which are very clear. For instance, when it comes to Article 108, that says in the view of the one presiding. See, it says in the view. So if the Speaker sits on a certain case, for instance, when it comes to a bill which will impose the charge on the consolidated fund, it says in the view of the one presiding. That is there. Well, but if you also disagree, you can go to the court, go and challenge it. That's the whole idea. So people can go to court. You know, there are certain things that we can argue and argue and argue at the end of the day when it comes to the interpretation. You may think that it is very clear. Somebody might say that is not the case. So because of that, he's putting it to test.
But
he can get fined as a result for wasting the court's time.
This is not the first time that there have been tension between the courts and Parliament.
True.
There was a High Court case, I remember very well, on the subject of serving a certain member of Parliament, where he was very clear that the court, he will not
entertain from the court.
The court.
I get it, yeah.
And I remember the judge then, because he disregarded the first court, direction that was given.
That's true.
And the lawyers went to court and complained. The judge then also used some very strong, I recall that case. And that eventually was resolved, right? And I think he gave a ruling that says that you can only serve as on a Monday, I believe. And yesterday when I was speaking to the majority side, they actually referenced that. So this is not the first time this tension had played out. The speakers...
Sorry, you're speaking to which side?
Again,
Evans, this is the thing about... You see, this is the thing about...
So I guess the point I'm making with that is that the speaker's... his own history on the subject, where the courts come to play in the affairs of Parliament is very clear. He believes clearly that the courts should not be interfering in the work of Parliament. I think that's where he stands ideologically on the subject.
He jealously guards, and he says so, that he will jealously guard that role that Parliament has to play and will not be the weak link.
And that is also what fortifies my prediction.
Okay, of the stance he's taking.
Because you need to look at, if you take him as a judge, you need to, and lawyers go before judges, and you have to study the judge's ruling over a period. You can safely predict on subjects of ideology and etc. where they may land in the subject. His position consistently when the courts had come intersect with the legislature has been, you can't come to Parliament and dictate to us what we do. His position has always been consistent on the subject. And if you read his recent ruling...
Remember even the anti-LGBTQ
matter. And he gave a ruling.
Yes.
That was same.
Then he kept on insisting that if you cross this line, you are interfering with the work of Parliament.
But of course, that's also when he said he has just been told that there's a seat at the Supreme Court. So he cannot approve it.
I remember when he used that, and see, almost like tongue-in-cheek at the time.
And it is exactly what he's going to do today, or may do today. I don't want to even predict what he's going to do. I'm just waiting patiently. But what I would say, and I've always maintained, is that, look, whatever happens, there are certain things that could have best been solved even amongst members of Parliament. I've had conversations about, whether, and the NPP had, unlike in 2020, where they had 169 members, and so they could write dismissing persons and writing to the Speaker to declare his seat vacant. This time around, you've heard the party has been very silent. They've not, dismissed members of parliament who had declared their intention to contest as independent candidates, even though the party's constitution is very clear on forfeiting your membership, because they know this could actually come up. But then we've had conversations. I mean, when Professor Michael Quay, for instance, says that, that's if the party comes in, I mean, no, then that's the point, because the party then wrote to him. But if that were the case, then this is a very justified ruling, because that person himself, by his action, has left the party. Yeah, that was the case. That these persons, by their own actions, have left the party. Okay, so you can declare their seats vacant, because the moment you decide to go against...
Remember even the chairman team period?
Yeah.
They said, oh, no, immediately you even express your interest to go out and go and be...
Oh, no, but chairman team himself said, don't expect any letter because
I'm gone.
Yeah, but they wrote to the others to tell them that to remind them that you are actually...
automatically out.
You're automatically out.
Okay.
But now, you can see, because of the difficulty, that's why I say that, you see...
In fact, because also of the formidable difficulty.
Yes, the difficulty and the precedent that was set by Professor Michael Quay, and which at the time inured to the benefit of the NPP, which they didn't need. You see, because they had 169 members in parliament.
It was an emotional decision.
He has even come out to say that the Speaker, in its current ruling, committed an illegality because the 4 members of parliament in question ought to be given an opportunity for a fair hearing.
He had always believed that Michael Quay was wrong. So for him, saying the Speaker is wrong, I mean, yes, to be giving a fair hearing. The Speaker says that's his understanding of the Constitution, of the law, of the standing orders of Parliament.
But in all fairness, why is the sometimes when these expressions are used, why is the fair hearing here?
Yeah.
The man is determining fact. Fact is, have you filed? Is there notice of poll that suggests that a vice minister filed on this day?
There is.
If there is, why do I need to ask the vice minister whether he's the one, or he has filed, or he intends staying? I mean, some of these things I don't get how we seem to bring in concepts almost as if
it's all about the technicalities and everything.
Oh yes, throwing a lot of this so that it sounds confusing.
At this point in time, the NPP needed it. I have said that I believed Speaker Michael Quay was wrong. I believe Speaker Bagbing is wrong. But whatever happens, Speaker Bagbing is in a position today to determine whether or not, now that he's taking processes to file, he would come again and says, this is his understanding, that because of this is it or that is it. Let us wait. But in the end, for me, in the end, these members of parliament, in the end, what they must be concerned about the most, the 2 main political parties, is, and so what?
There is something that is happening in our politics that I've observed as a very problematic trend. Lack of principle.
Yeah.
The way people can change positions without further evidence and anything aggravating that, merely because times have changed, is troubling for me. It should worry you. And it's not out of an evolved thinking. It should worry you that yesterday you believed this. And today, just because it suits your political thinking, you can stay out of the conversation, but can switch easily. And they don't even offer any prudent explanation for it. It's so wobbly that you ask yourself, what is the principle this one operating with? Because if, my position is that this is how this should be done, no difficulty.
Yeah.
Under any circumstance, that is how we get to know how you as judges will vote. You get my point? Because throughout the 20 or so years the person has been sitting there, very consistent with principle. But our people, today, I like, what they call it, fufu. Tomorrow, without anything changing, he has not heard of fufu before. He even goes ahead to say very terrible things about fufu and everything connected to that. Do you get my point? That is a problem. Secondly, there is something that Professor Rouse, for example, teaches first-year political science students. The principles are 1, compromise, consensus building, and collaboration. Winston, I think that is leaving our politics. The people can no longer make some sit down, like we are sitting here, make concessions for the collective good of this state. They take way too entrenched positions, not out of principle, but out of partisan considerations that you forget who the ultimate beneficiary of the policy is supposed to be. So are we saying that all these 275 members there, including Speaker, and their leaders couldn't have sat in a room to resolve this matter without making all of us agents of this conversation?
So
yesterday you spoke with Habib Idris and he served notice.
On this point. So yesterday, there were attempts to get both sides to sit in the room and talk.
Exactly.
At the very highest level in this country, eminent Ghanaians, both home and abroad, try to mediate. I mean, I know because an eminent Ghanaian reached out, they're looking for contacts of other eminent Ghanaians, and I was asking why, and he explained to me that they're putting together this coalition. This is a very, very serious level. They actually attempted to get the Speaker involved, and this was not just minority-majority, but also Speaker and Chief Justice, right? Try to get them to talk, the two arms, in fact, including the President, right? Everybody. So minority-majority leadership, the President, Speaker, the Chief Justice, everybody sitting down to talk. Now, then in the evening, I spoke to the Deputy Majority Whip, who was clear that because of the entrenched positions on both sides, they have not managed to talk. And so we got into today with nobody talking to each other. It's the reason why we...
No concessions even made.
Nobody,
I mean,
no
what kind
concession.
of politics?
It's the reason why you saw what played out this morning, where both sides were eager to get into the chamber first so that they can take the seat on the majority side, because they could not talk the day before when everybody had tried to try and get people to sit and have a conversation. And so where we are now, I don't really see that changing. I don't see that changing. And if my fears are confirmed, as in what the Speaker may do later today, this is going to, for the rest of the day and again, then once the Speaker does that, it comes back to the Supreme Court, right? But the Supreme Court will have to, have to then decide whether to grant the Speaker's application or not. You see, and you make the point, I want to return to that. By the time we are done with this back and forth, I think the biggest losers in all this is our democracy. But it is the judiciary. Our last line of defense. That is being significantly diminished in terms of its respect that it has among everybody else. The if you like, the faith that people repose, and the CDD's Afrobarometer report says it. It is not necessarily because of its doing. It's just because this whole back and forth has placed them in a very impossible situation. Although I agree that the Supreme Court itself sometimes hasn't helped itself in the way it sort of considered some matters and haven't done for others. But by the time we are done, those who, and you see, remember, all this is happening in the context of an election which is just over 40 days away.
And I'll hold you to that. Let me go to Kweku Asante now. He's in Parliament, just giving us an update of what exactly is happening. We told you earlier that the Speaker has arrived. Kweku, what's happening in the chamber?
Well, we expect that the Speaker, Alban Bagbeli, will pretty shortly walk in and gavel the House in session. Ultimately, that is what a lot of people are waiting for now. And as we wait for the Speaker of Parliament to walk into the chamber, his convoy did arrive here about 10 minutes ago when the majority leadership had just left. And in fact, that will mean that pretty soon we expect that he will come in and gavel the House in session. And that will ultimately lead the House to start proceeding. And I just understand from one source within the majority, the NDC caucus leadership, that the reason why the Speaker of Parliament hasn't come in to start proceedings is because he's waiting for his lawyers to complete the filing of some processes he has mandated them to file at the Supreme Court. Between yesterday and now, we have been expecting lawyers for the Speaker of Parliament to file an action in court that is seeking to stay the hand of the Supreme Court. So after the Supreme Court says his declaration, he has also been seeking to stay sane using the same procedure that was used by election official marking his application and ex parte application. And so we understand that is being worked on as we speak. And as soon as that is done, and the Speaker says that information, he will come in. And then, of course, inform the House as to what the next steps are for Parliament of Ghana, whether or not he's going to order the NDC MPs, who are now their numbers, over 100 of them, having taken the seat in the majority side of the House, leaving the minority side, their usual sitting place for the last 3.5 years, completely empty. He will ask them to go back there, or he will have look gloss over that and allow them to sit in the position they are sitting in there. 2 hours ago, in fact, less than that, we had from Alexander Martin, the leader of the NPP caucus in Parliament, who did indicate that the side did not want to stay on the floor because doing so might lead to violent confrontation, and they do not want to give the NDCMP what they have been looking for which reason he has asked all of them to leave and go back to their offices and wait for the speaker to come. Following that, Kenneth Japan came in here, about 2 other entities also came, but they have also all since left, which has meant that the Chamber of Parliament is currently inhabited by just NDCMP who are seated in the majority pews in Parliament, insisting that they are the true majority. You have seen scenes where they've been marching, they have been singing patriotic songs, singing their party anthem, singing some revolutionary songs that have roots in their party. And so the eyes of the nation currently on the Speaker of Parliament, whose security details about 10 minutes ago went around his chair, of course, to do their usual briefing to ensure that it's safe for him to come. And they are standing about 5 meters away from where I can see from his base and his chair, monitoring that with other security members of his, while the Speaker of Parliament is in there at the leadership lobby. The minority leader, or I should say the leader of the NDC, Dr. Kasala Tupote, is currently not on the seat. When the Speaker of Parliament walked into his lobby, he was asked to go there because normally they will have what is called the pre-sitting meeting. So a number of the leaders on the NDC side have joined him there. The NPP, we understand, are not there because Alexander Martin and his other leaders all went to the Justice 100 Dome, the very far off from the dome where Parliament is sitting. So there's a pre-sitting meeting currently happening with the Speaker of Parliament and the leader of the NPP caucus, without the leaders of the NPP caucus present, because they have left the Justice. We do not know if an invitation has been extended to them and whether or not they are coming or they have declined it. That is information we can get confirmation for in the next few minutes or the next few hours. But the detail now is that, in fact, just getting confirmation that Alexander Martin has come into that meeting. And so Alexander Martin, who is the leader of the NPP caucus in Parliament, is also in there currently with the Speaker of Parliament, with Kasala Tupote, and other members of leadership on both sides of the House to try and get some understanding before he comes in. And usually, whatever happens on the floor of Parliament does not take each person or any MP by surprise, because they have what they call the pre-sitting meeting, where they agree on all these modalities. They agree that this is the position, they're not going to give in to this, this is what we are going to do, and then they come in and then come and sit, and then reenact all the issues, all the disagreements we've had in this pre-sitting meeting. So I can confirm that Alexander Martin has come into this meeting with the Speaker of Parliament as well as the leader of the NDC caucus to try and get an understanding of what exactly will happen when the Speaker of Parliament finally walks into the chamber and governs the House in session for 2 minutes.
Before I let you go, Kweku, I saw the former minority leader, Haruna Iddrisu, having a conversation with Kennedy Japan. There has been calls for both sides to negotiate behind closed doors. You've been doing some snooping around. Has there been any such meeting between the NPP caucus and the NDC caucus?
Well, speaking of the former minority leader, he's seated right in front of me. I can just see him from where I'm standing. And he is in conversation with some members of the staff. What I can tell you is that there is no appetite within the backbenches on both sides for any compromise to take place. And at this point, leadership is what it will take. And that is the leadership on both sides of the aisle without to drop down their entrenched positions and perhaps carry their members along. Because if you look at the backbenches, they want to go all out. And this is from both the NDC and NPP side. All of them say their leaders should stay the course, they should acknowledge themselves as the majority in Parliament, they should not give in to any compromise. That would make a little bit of the leadership duties and the job of the leaders pretty difficult. Because when your backbenchers are riling, when your backbenchers are asking to take a certain course, they push you in a very difficult position to take another course. And so ultimately, that is why this meeting currently ongoing between the Speaker of Parliament and the leaders on both sides is crucial. Because ultimately, when they come back and they communicate to their members that this is what we have agreed on, their members may disagree, they begrudge them, but normally they comply when it comes to matters like this. So ultimately, that is so crucial for the Speaker of Parliament and the leaders to be able to have an agreement. That means business of Parliament will at least be able to see. There are so many key businesses that the government side cannot afford to have them delayed. In fact, just this morning, the government has delayed so many bills, including the free education bill and a number of other bills that they are expecting to put before the House. The more Parliament delays, the less time they have to deal with all this. Mind you, Parliament is expected to sit for 4 weeks, and they will again, meeting, go for election and come back on the midnight of the 7th of January 2025 to swear in the 9th Parliament. So there is not enough time for the House to do a number of business. And so if these disagreements are not ironed out quickly, the House sits and do business, that will mean a lot of government business will suffer. Mind you, there's also expected to be the vote of appropriation. That is the budget for the first quarter of next year. That must come either next week or next week, early November. That must come. And without this disagreement, this uncertainty, it makes it difficult for that process to come. And that will mean the first quarter of next year, it could lead to a government shutdown literally. And we have heard just suggest among the NDC that the Speaker of Parliament should perhaps attend the House any day until the Supreme Court determines those matters that are currently before them. That will mean there will be no budget, the government cannot fund its operations in the first quarter of next year. So there's a lot of things at stake, and that is why that meeting that is currently ongoing in the Speaker's lobby for the Speaker of Parliament and the leaders of both sides is so crucial to try and get some understanding for Gina.
Thank you, Kukwa Asante. Let's come back in the studio, and I'm just come back to Evans Mensah. This whole back and forth in Parliament is clearly going to affect business in Parliament. We have 2 Supreme Court judges that are yet to be vetted and approved by Parliament. Other issues on the floor yet to be decided. The Speaker, as we await his ruling today, how would this affect Parliament moving forward?
No, and that is why I slightly disagree with Raymond and Winston when they say, "Oh, this is much ado about nothing." Who is majority has consequences because those Supreme Court nominees are now within the precinct of Parliament. The executive has discharged their mandate. They've reformed the Speaker. So tomorrow, the NDC side, if indeed they believe they might, can constitute the appointments committee, vet them, take it to the plenary, debate and reject it. Well, why is he looking at me like they can't do that? But
Raymond, you disagree?
It can't disagree because they can do that. Once the executive has written to the Speaker and it has been read to the members, the only thing that remains is for the appointments committee to sit, to be constituted. They go there, they vet them, they approve or disapprove. They can do that. And then the e-levy one, they have said they will come, the repeal, they'll be triggered by a private member's motion. And then they would obviously vote on it and repeal it. What I don't know is whether once repealed, that too has to go to the president for us.
It has to go to the president. So this is it. You can have, so when Parliament goes through a bill, and after the 3rd reading, it becomes an act. So at the end of the 3rd reading, you hear an act to so and so. It doesn't become law until the president assents to it. It is the reading. So if they
does that apply to a bill that has been repealed?
But who's going to repeal the bill? So
that's my point I'm making. They will start the process.
So this is the law.
So ordinarily, the Attorney General would have come, would have initiated the process.
So you see.
But it will use the private member's route to get the
So you see. There's an act of Parliament. You're going to do an amendment. So
it's not an amendment. It's not an amendment. It's a repeal.
But you cannot repeal it.
Why can't they? Parliament can repeal.
No. The members of Parliament cannot repeal.
Why?
The executive, you check. So
no, but are you talking about the initiation of the process?
This e-levy, they can't repeal it.
No. I mean, clarify. Are you talking about the initiation of the process or the power to repeal?
I'm talking about the initiation of the process.
Yes, but the initiation of the process. Wait. 2 things. The initiation of the process, they said, they will trigger that using the private member's motion. So it won't come from the Attorney General. Once that happens, remember, Parliament is the master of his own rules. The Speaker admits it. It is properly before the House for consideration. Raymond, you hold a different view.
I agree with you generally on whether they can initiate that. But, Evans Spencer, this, in the view of the person presiding, affects the finances of the country. If there is any bill that affects, or its repeal that will affect the finances of this country, you're talking about the e-levy. Do you get my point? So it will be strange not to have the executive presidency having a say on it.
So let me just read Article 108 for you.
You get my point? Yeah.
Simple. It says, settlement of financial matters. Parliament shall not, unless the bill is introduced or the motion is introduced by or on behalf of the President, proceed upon a bill, including an amendment to a bill that, in the opinion of the person presiding, makes provision for any of the following: the imposition of taxation or the alteration of taxation, otherwise than by reduction, or the imposition of a charge on the consolidated fund or other public funds, off or on the alteration of any such charge, otherwise the payment, issue, or withdrawal from the consolidated fund or other public funds of Ghana of any monies not charged on the consolidated fund, or any increase in the amount of that payment, issue, or withdrawal, or the composition of a remission of any debt due to the government of Ghana, or proceed upon a motion, including an amendment to a motion, the effect of which, in the opinion of the person presiding, would be to make provision for any of the purposes specified in paragraph A of this article.
Yeah, but you said amendment. Is it the same as repeal?
What are you going? It is very clear.
No, but you said that
it is very clear. It is very clear what you're going to do. What are you going to do?
It's not the same as repeal.
I think that's an interesting.
I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I'm asking the question, but I don't know. I mean, that's the
you see.
You see, what are we debating?
You know, the same conversation we had over this LI 2462.
Yes, yes.
As to the procedure for repealing the act and who is supposed to commence it.
To trigger
I heard
procedure.
members of parliament say, "What were you expecting us to do about it?"
Yeah.
Are we the ones who are supposed to trigger any commencement procedures? He said government should come and take their law out. If they brought it, they should take it out. So that's what I heard them say. I do not, okay, maybe they'll get us clarity on these matters. Again, we are discussing whether or not changing who is called majority or minority leader is consequential, which is the foremost debate we are having on our table today. All of the standoff is on the basis. I've heard when Cassiel Atufosin did his press conference on Sunday, he was categorical. We will repeal e-levy. We will do this. We will do this. All these things are possible.
Then bring us to the question.
I do not know
is
whether
repealing the same as amending?
No, I mean, of course, that question can be answered by me. First and foremost, you have a law that's gone through the processes. Repealing is taking it off the books completely. Amending is making changes to the law. Sometimes you can actually make changes, say, with an addition of a document. Remember, when we had the Mining and Minerals and Mining Act, we went to do an amendment and changed 3 provisions. The one that talked about the procedure for the distributing mining equipment and also the fines regime and all of that. We did all of that. We didn't need to repeal, but this one, we are taking the law in its entirety from our books. We are not reducing the percentage from 1.5 to 1.0, which would have required an amendment. I hope you get the point. So I am not sure whether they think they are clothed with the powers to do so. I hope you get the point.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard somebody say, if they go by the route of amendment, they could have easily decided that now e-levy, even though we are charging it, is 0%, which is basically like repealing it.
So that's amending.
Yes, amending it.
Yeah.
So
that then goes to
is the charge. Yes.
Clause that he
is the charge that they will just change from 1.5 or so to 0%. To some people, it fixes the same problem. But all of these are difficulties, and you don't expect a majority that will be blind accomplices in your works that you are doing. They will certainly fight it. They will fight it because they know that at least you have only one number. But do you need not 75% or whichever number to merely carry through some of these your votes? Would you need a single number in some of these instances? So that would be the other issue that they have to contend
But
with.
this is subject to the Speaker's ruling today and live in Parliament.
Yes, we are hoping that...
This conversation is important.
Exactly.
What question are we answering? Why is all this important?
Important, yes. Why are they fighting over this place?
And that's what we are trying to understand. This is important because of the implication of who has the majority in the House, right? So you have the numbers for a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay. Which of those is 9 to 2?
Yeah.
So they will have quorum to do business. But then you also need a simple majority for binding decisions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So those are two different things. So they can actually do parliamentary business. But can they, say, pass a legislation?
Yeah.
Because there you need a simple majority of all members of parliament, which in this case will be 1, 3, 8.
Would they go up to 8? Oh, okay, of all members.
Of all members.
Yes, yes.
Of all members.
Yeah, of all members.
Of all members of parliament.
No, hold on.
But
now that we have
if-
removed 4.
Now that these ones have
No, but that's the thing, right?
Yes, are they still members of parliament? Now that we have declared vacant 4 seats.
Of 1, 3. So the point we're making is that this is a very complex matter, but clearly whoever has the majority has implications for the outcomes that we are seeking or will be sought in Parliament.
And I'll be shocked if this NDC group is seeking the majority just for the namesake.
No, they've said what they
No,
want.
yes, that's why I listened to
What
the
they plan to do in that, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll be shocked if, but see,
But-
how is it possible
Yeah.
that if the NDC says they want to repeal e-levy, then you in the minority government say no?
You don't want it.
But
when your
Dr. Mame is saying that you repeal
I said
it. And all of you are basically in support of his actions anyway. What is the cumulative effect of repealing e-levy 2 months to an election? Will that affect your fortunes heavily? Will that affect your finances heavily? That you want to lose an election based on that?
Yeah,
I don't know if you get the point.
Yeah, I get it.
It will be pushing them to the brink.
Except that until you renegotiate the terms of the IMF deal, you can't repeal the e-levy.
We can repeal e-levy. The IMF deal is not a law in this country.
On your screens now.
Yes.
Hold on, I'll come back to you in the studio. Hold on, Evans. On your screens now, I can see Alexander Feyomarkin, the leader of the MPP caucus in Parliament, walking back into Parliament. Now, he walked out earlier, told his members to leave because he wanted the NDC side of the House to leave the majority seat. He said, quote, he will not be a part of that lawless theatre happening on the floor. He has returned. What does that mean for what we're seeing in Parliament? We're also live on Joy Prime. If you're watching us on the Joy Prime channel, we're just giving you happenings in Parliament. The Speaker is yet to mount the podium. He would be delivering a verdict today that would actually alter the makeup in Parliament and determine who exactly would be majority. We're just discussing the majority rule here and how it will affect business in Parliament moving forward. Evans, make your point.
No, I mean, I'm just making the point that this has the consequences. And well, he's walked back in, that's his Feyomarkin. It actually suggests, remember that Kweku had told us that there had been a meeting between himself and the Speaker, and I believe Atoforson was there too, for him to walk out now, and I can see there's what appears to be a briefing happening on the floor now.
Yeah.
And you see, I don't know who is wearing the Ghana flag. It looks like the MP for Ningo Pram Pram.
Sam George. That's Sam George.
Sam George.
Yeah.
There's a briefing. They may have reached some form of a compromise outcome here.
Yeah.
That is being communicated. And normally you see the backbenchers are the ones who can put a lot of pressure on the leadership to say whether they accept it or not, whatever the negotiated outcome is. But we'll get to know pretty shortly. The way Feyomarkin walked in confidently and shaking hands, maybe he seemed to be pretty happy about the outcome. But we will see very soon what that announcement, the Speaker will tell us.
And one of them will mean if they start moving. For example, if we see the people occupying the majority side move to the minority side, it would have told us something, right? It would have been an indication of something.
It will mean that the NDC's caucus in Parliament, they have actually conceded that indeed they are now the minority. Which they have said they would not.
In any case, I'm not seeing them start moving.
They haven't yet.
I don't know whether they have to reach consensus with the people because sometimes it might be tricky.
But we saw a
If
lot
you
of
don't
chat
prepare-
in the background. We
Yes.
saw the former minority leader, Haruna Iddrisu, who actually triggered this whole thing by making that statement on the floor, having a chat with Kennedy Japong. So it means that there are a lot of conversations going on back there as to how that will play out on the floor. We're yet to see that. Make your point, Raymond.
No, I really do not think that Japan is the person that the majorities would have set for
Why
for
not?
the negotiation.
He wields a
on
lot
this
of
one.
power in the MP, doesn't he?
I have not seen, and I'm beginning to get worried about that, Evans Spencer.
You know that.
I've not seen the likes of Joe Osei-Osu. I've not seen the likes of former majority leader Osechi Mensah-Bonsu. These people have history of being able to rally people around causes and making sure that they come to some
But if they are
understanding.
being effective,
They are-
but if they are being effective, you won't see them. They will operate in the shadows. They operate quietly,
showing.
but effectively.
So, for example, when the majority came in and the numbers came in, I didn't see them.
But no, but here's the thing. Knowing Osechi Mensah-Bonsu,
Yes.
he's such a fine gentleman. Because Afenyo Marking is a leader now, I don't see him publicly making a pronouncement on it because he doesn't want to take a shine. He will give him all the support he requires.
Okay,
and possibly
except you are
even
saying that that's
negotiate.
happening already.
I don't know whether that's happening. But knowing Osechi Mensah-Bonsu, he's so magnanimous that I won't be surprised that he is in the background there advising Afenyo and holding his hand and helping him try and negotiate an outcome. Although, of course, I mean, he's entitled to be aggrieved and to be happy at what is happening because obviously it tells very badly on Afenyo Marking himself. But knowing him, I'm pretty sure that he's involved. Him, but also Joe Osei-Osu, both have the same temperament. They are very magnanimous. They look at the bigger picture almost always. I won't be surprised if they are involved in trying, because they have a relationship with the speaker.
Yeah, yeah.
That they can leverage at this point. In fact, there's a case to be made that the two of them have a far better relationship with the speaker than Haruna, than even possibly Kesla Toforsi.
That's true.
You can make that case because Kesla has been there not too long, but we've seen the tensions that sometimes play out between himself, but the minority side and the speaker. And that is why, for me, the timing of this and the speaker's position on the matter, you can't take away the politics and the elections and the potential outcome.
Yeah.
When you're 2 years away from an election,
2 months, really.
I'm just making a point. When you're 2 years away from an election, you can play the middle ground and be neutral. When you are less than 2 months on election, when the outcome is staring in the face, that is the time to prove your loyalty. If there are people who still doubt your loyalty.
Because people have raised it, actually.
Of course,
yes,
that's my point. That's my
they
point.
They have
My
actually
point is
felt that
we
made
applauded
you speaker.
him.
Yeah.
We applauded him in the past for taking the national interest route on certain matters in the past.
That's true.
That incurred the wrath of the NDC side. He can't do that now.
Well, let me bring in Winston at this point.
I don't
Still on
think,
the speaker.
maybe he can't do that now is overstating it, exaggeration. It'll be more difficult for him to do that now.
We've been speaking to Esla Owusu-Ekufo. She's MP for Ablikuma West. She spoke to my colleague Carlos Caloni, and she's warning the speaker not to end his tenure with the same tensions atmosphere that marked his election as speaker. What would you advise the speaker to do in this case?
Well, I think the speaker knows what he wants to do at this point. it's not advice from anybody who would change the speaker's mind. I mean, at this point in time, the speaker's mind may be made up.
But what would be the peaceful way to go?
Well, it's why the speaker is decided to, if what we're being told is anything to go, but he's decided to file a case at the Supreme Court. A stay also, setting aside what the Supreme Court's ruling has been. So what that would mean is that the speaker wants to resort to the law. And if he wants to resort to the law, then it means that the speaker would then tell us what his understanding of the process he's filed is. I mean, I'm not the one to teach the speaker a law. He's a lawyer. I mean, season one of that matter, he was called to the bar in some 42 years ago. He knows what to do. But of course, at this point in time, people would actually play with the law. And so if he decides to play with the law, I don't have a problem with it. And so for me, I still stand by my earlier position. I think that it's much ado about nothing, really. It's galvanizing party-based, but that's not really a lot of things.
With just 2 months to the election, Raymond, is this much ado about nothing?
it depends on the lens you're actually looking at it from. First and foremost, if it's to further your political interest, parochial, personal political interest. It might be a feather in your cap. You follow how the NDC supporters are saying, yeah, we are now going to be in charge. We will do all the things that we said we will do. We are starting the implementation of the resetting agenda now. As to whether that would be fruitful or see any light of day, I mean, I think that's still a long shot. But it helps ginger a base. It helps keeps the pressure on your opponents in a way that you appear to be in the driving seat even when you are in opposition. You get the point? Those are the things that politically can take as boxes, but that is real politics.
So by the way, a lawyer says repeal doesn't need assent.
Doesn't need assent.
Okay,
No, it doesn't need assent.
Yeah. So if it doesn't need assent, then they can repeal it.
No, repealing of a law doesn't need assent.
They can repeal it.
So let me come to you, Evans, because we're looking at the political implications now. What is playing out in Parliament? We've heard from John Dramani Mahama. He's on the grounds. He claims that what is playing out in Parliament shows what would happen in the upcoming polls. People are watching, supporters of both the NDC and the NPP. How will this affect voting pattern in the upcoming polls?
For the NDC, in fact, both sides, more for the NPP because they're incumbents. And the biggest challenge incumbents face when their 2 terms are about to expire in their 8th year, the biggest threat is apathy. To galvanize your base, you need to win stuff like this. Because your base, they can get very upset that you allowed your opponents to have their way. And politicians respond to that. Part of the reason why the first course of action, as we heard yesterday, that the party wanted to take was to mass supporters there. NDC, from what I've seen some intelligence that suggests that NDC, they were trying to get their members to mass at least 200 members to the floor, to Parliament. We've seen MPP actually do that. So if you cede ground, your base, your grassroots will eat you alive. If you cede ground, they'll eat you alive. And you need to galvanize them. NDC needs the same. Remember, there was a time when Haruna Idrisu, one of Haruna Idrisu's biggest sins was when he allowed, well, not he allowed, but he lost a significant fight in Parliament over the appointees that came to the floor for consideration from the president, including the minister for, at the time,
there was information.
There was information minister.
There was a Greek.
There was a Greek. There was the minister responsible for the lady,
fisheries.
The fisheries minister.
How
Cookson.
And all the deliveries
exactly.
he delivered.
When he lost that fight and they got approved, in fact, Howard Cookson got
the highest
number of votes after he had tore the NDC to shreds prior to. Do you know what happened? The NDC grassroots were asking for blood to the point where Sami Jemfi publicly called out Haruna Idrisu, right? So for me, the biggest implication of this politically in elections, knowing that the NPP, their biggest threat is galvanizing their base, is to see this ground. Their base will be very upset, and they need to do something to win this, to show to them that we still have the gravitas and the aggression is there. Use that to galvanize the base. NDC same. NDC wants to stand their ground and to show that they also can fight and win. And Case Latu Forsen is a very difficult spot. He only got strength to replace Haruna because Haruna, after that defeat, Haruna was on sinking ground. And it wasn't, I'm not even surprised that eventually he and Muntaka both left. The base, the grassroots never forgave both of them. After that, they were never the same until they lost. And for me, I will tie that back to that defeat. So you cannot lose this battle. And we haven't really analyzed that politically. And so people think, oh, let's go to the law. But this is less than for just over 40 days to an election.
Yeah.
It is a big deal. Everybody there is trying to gather a show to their base that we are aggressive. We can match them boot for boot. It matters in how you excite that base to turn out and vote for you in your strongholds. And I think the speaker is showing up now.
The speaker in Parliament.